Good morning, everybody. My name is Jamie with Creations of Studio 39, and this is what I call the ABCs of art. For 6.5 years now, I've been doing a video on Monday mornings at 10:30 Eastern. And this year, what I decided to do was go through the ABCs twice for the 52 weeks every Monday and pull out a letter and then talk about some type of art technique, art concept, art movement, something related to art that hopefully helps to spark your creativity and teaches you maybe a little something more to help you with your art in general. And today, for the letter C, as we go through the second round of the letters, I'm going to talk about something that probably there are entire semesters of college devoted to this topic. And I'm going to try in the next 35 minutes or so to talk about as much as I can. So whatever you have to do to bookmark, save, come back to whatever, get out a notebook, take some notes, this is probably one that will have the most useful information for you to improving your artwork, to making it look better, even when you don't even know what that better is, and just overall giving you some actual rules. And I know there's not supposed to be rules in art, but I will tell you that this particular word that I'm going to talk about today is one of those areas where there are rules, because there are rules, because it makes sense. It is designed to make your artwork better. So there are, I'll call them guidelines. Let's just call them guidelines, because in art, people always break rules, but guidelines are meant to help you to become a better artist. I see Kathy saying good morning. Hello there, Kathy. So the letter C that I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to actually give you the definition so that you have that, so you may want to write it down. And then what I'm going to do is flip around my camera, because I'm going to show you some of the guidelines, and then I'm going to critique some of the guidelines. So I'll tell you more about that. But the letter is the letter C, and it is for the word composition. Composition. Anything that you do in art has a composition. Now, whether it is a good composition or not, that's probably where you're wanting it to be better. You're wanting it to have a better composition, because even if you don't know the guidelines, you know that something's off. You know that something's not quite right. And composition is everything. It is everything all rolled up into one about why a piece is not working and why something is working. Because ultimately, as an artist, yes, we create for ourselves, and yes, we create for the joy of it and the relaxation of it, and we create it for our own. But in the creation of artwork, it's meant to be viewed by someone else. That's just the nature of it. Or we would create it and, I don't know, throw it away, burn it, whatever. Art by its nature is meant to be viewed. So these guidelines are to help in making your artwork more pleasing to the eye, more viewable, if you will. My throat just got a little scratchy, so I'm going to take a drink of water. So here is the definition of composition. I wrote it down so I would not forget any of the words to you. So you may want to write this down. It is the arrangement of the visual elements within a frame to tell a story and guide the viewer's eye. Hi there, Lori. It has anniversary follower up above your name today. I don't know that I've ever noticed that, Lori. So probably because I'm at 6.5 years and you've probably come up to some type of anniversary. So here's the definition again of composition. It is the arrangement of visual elements within a frame to tell a story and guide the viewer's eye. So all of those things, if you break those down, that is everything about creating a piece of artwork. It's an arrangement of the visual elements within the frame of whatever you're using, whether it's a rectangle, a square, a circle, like within the frame to tell a story. Those are the ones that always get me, that tell a story. And I can look at the piece of artwork and I can see that. To guide the viewer's eye. Like I said, when you create art, by its very nature, it is meant to be viewed. So the piece that I really want to pull out there for you, and then I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to show you examples, I'm going to critique some examples, is visual elements. Now, last year, during the ABCs of Art, I did the elements and the principles of art. And that is really, when I was teaching, what I spent a lot of time talking about. The different elements like line and color and shape and form. We talked about those elements. We did projects with those elements. And you can break, color especially, you can break those down and teach a lot about those. And then the principles are the things really that I think about more with composition. They're like balance and unity and harmony and movement and the principles of how you arrange the visual elements. So the arrangement is all of those principles. Are you starting to see how composition is everything? It is everything about art and creating art on a frame, not, a literal frame, but within the rectangle, square, whatever you're using, that type of frame. It's everything about what you're putting onto that frame. It is all of the elements and principles and how the piece of artwork tells a story, and it's all of that. That's why composition is the thing that if you feel like your artwork is not good, you may be talking about skills and techniques, but a lot of times what I see is more composition. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my phone around because I'm going to show you some words, and words do not flip around on my Droid. Actually, I don't know if they even flip around now for an iPhone, but definitely on my Droid, they do not. So I'm going to turn my phone around. I'm going to show you the 15 different types of composition that you can follow. So if you wanted to take a screenshot, or I will tell you how to get what I'm going to be showing to you, it may be helpful for you too. So lots of information today. Like I said, whatever you need to do to save this, bookmark it. Over on YouTube, when I put the replay up later today, you want to go save it over on your YouTube already watch. There's something over on YouTube where you can kind of save your videos that you want to have over there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera on my phone around so that you can see this paper that I have actually cut down so that it fits in my journal. So I did it like at a 5x8 inch size in my printer, and I printed it out that way. So let me go ahead and turn around here, and I had to figure out where is that now? So let me see if I can get this turned around here, and you can see the Beginner's Guide to Composition. And I will move that up in the frame just a little bit more there. So if you want to take a screenshot of that, or if you just go into, I'll leave my finger out of there. If you just go to Google and you type Beginner's Guide to Composition, and then you click on the image tab, this is the picture that will show up. So that's how you can go find it if you want to print out your own copy and make it your own size. And I don't even know, it didn't print off with a name or anything to give someone credit for it. But these are the 15 different types of composition that I'm going to talk to you about. And even if you only learn how to do one of these, your artwork will be better because of it. And then I have some magazines that I'm going to go through. Hey there, Donna, you were able to catch me live today. I'm going to go through some magazines and critique these different types of composition. So I thought what I would do inside my journal is I would put some washi tape, which I don't have right here, so that I could be able to lift it up, and I would find some examples maybe that I could fit in, underneath here. But let me go ahead and tell you these different types of composition, and then I'm going to look for or critique the ones and see if they fit any of these in the magazines that I have. So there are some basic things to kind of remember, and like these are some of the guidelines, but I'm going to be telling you about some other things too about composition. If the only one that you remember out of all of these 15 is the rule of thirds, it will probably be the most helpful one, and I'm sure that I'll be able to find some examples of the rule of thirds. Anytime that you are setting up a composition and you're deciding where to put things in your composition, and this works best with a rectangle, right? You can see like all of these are in a rectangle. It's a little bit different when you start doing a square canvas, a circular canvas. That's a little bit different. You can still do some of these, but it's just a little bit different. But the rule of thirds on a rectangle is if you create this grid of a 3x3 grid, and anywhere that these lines intersect in these 4 spaces here, those are the best places to put your focal point, your image that you want to stand out, your thing. So I'm going to find some pictures. I want to go through all of them, and then I'll find some pictures and we'll see which composition we feel like they fit. But if you can kind of imagine a beach scene and you have people standing in the beach scene, if you have the people right here in the middle, it's just kind of boring. The water's going straight across, the people are right in the center. We think that that is the type of picture that we want in front of a beach, but to the viewer, it's predictable. It's kind of boring. So if you just take the people and you move them over to, say, this bottom right corner, that or intersection there, it's a much more interesting composition. It just creates a little bit more mystery, a little bit more interest, like, especially I think of people like looking out at the ocean. Like, what are they looking at? It's probably over here to the left somewhere. It just creates like a little bit more just mystery is the best word. So the rule of thirds. So if you can imagine this grid over your surface of your painting that you're doing, and if you place your focal point in one of those 4 intersections, that's definitely a more interesting composition. Remember, it's about the viewer. It's maybe not about what you like the best. You want to learn these guidelines so then you can intentionally break the rules, right? Break the guidelines. So this golden section one, this is kind of where that little center section could potentially be. I still feel like this is a little bit less interesting than a composition like this, but you can have this golden section that kind of goes along with this golden spiral one, where you have this little tiny area right here, and it's kind of spiraling around to that little area. This one is a golden triangle, and I think about any time where what's called leading lines, so this diagonal line that goes across there, it leads your eye. So I think of like a fence line, it leads your eye. Instead of the fence going straight across, you put it at a diagonal, and it leads your eye across the canvas in that line, in that diagonal. But you can do that with steps. You can do that with doors, windows, any kinds of things where it's a diagonal line. And you've probably even seen where there's two diagonal lines, which is a little bit more like, like this one down here, having it kind of at an angle. Or I think of like paths or roads, or this S curve, this compound curve here. I think of like a river or stream or a path, or anything that's kind of like this angle. So if you can, I always think of taking photos because I use my photos for inspiration, but I think about when I'm taking a photo, I don't just take like the straight path. I'll turn it at an angle, and I'll get more of this like movement through there, or even turning it at an angle to get that diagonal like these. And those are always going to create more interest for the viewer. So probably when you're looking at a painting that you've done, a piece of artwork that you've done, and you're just, I don't know, something feels off, something feels not right. Like, have you ever asked yourself that and you don't really know? Apply some of these compositional guidelines to it and see if it doesn't meet one of these, if it's not resembling one of these, that's probably what feels off, because it's just kind of static. It's kind of boring. It's kind of predictable. So this spiral section is almost kind of like this golden spiral. So it's just like this little section here, and there might be something and all of the things around it, whether you use color or use lights and darks or lines or whatever it is, kind of meets in that little section there. I can think of a famous painting where there's a little house and there's all this field and sky and kind of like everything around it. And there are some things that kind of lead to this little house. And it's just kind of, because it's not right in the middle, right? This, the golden section one could work where it's kind of right in the middle, but this is, the size of it is smaller. And because it's offset a little bit and to the right, that composition, there's always just something to me like very mysterious about it. Like, who lives in that house and why is it so far away? And it just creates this instant feeling of like mystery in there. So I talked about the golden spiral one, and this spiral is not a literal line that's drawn on your canvas, but again, you might use elements of color or shapes or lines or lights and darks and values to create that spiral that leads your eye to that little space there. This little harmonious triangle, I think it's, it's very similar to this one, just it's turned at like the different angle. But what it's saying is these little triangular shapes have interest in there. And I've seen this one. We'll look in the magazines and I'll see if I can't find one that's kind of this composition. But I still kind of think about the focal point is at one of those intersecting lines there. So, hi there, Sue. And I've seen this composition like a cross. And even when it is, I always think of like a beach kind of scene and you have the horizon, think about the horizon line not being right in the center. If it's up here along the top and the sunrise, the sunset is right at the top part in that intersection, really, that's kind of creating like that cross. And, even with the lines that would be in the sunset, with the reflection, that's kind of creating like that cross kind of composition. And your eyes leading up to that focal point of the sun there. This focal mass one, I kind of think of just all of these people, like all of these little dots are like people, and they're all kind of like gathered around a concert or something, so it's like these separate little parts, and then they form like this mass. I think about like in the fall, like the leaves around the tree, and there are some other little leaves. So instead of just the fall tree and the bunch of leaves there, you're kind of placing these other little leaves that are related, that they go with this mass, but there are these other little parts. Leaves is one of the ones. We'll see if we can find an example. This V arrangement also works if it's like an A, kind of arrangement, but it's kind of focusing all of the elements, the focal point, kind of in this area, and your eyes leading, and the focal point may even be kind of like all the way down here at the bottom. I think about when it's like the A, I think about when you're taking a photograph of people, a lot of times people will just line people up, and it's much more interesting if you kind of place them in, somebody in the front and kind of people going back. I've seen like wedding parties, right? That are kind of, the bride and groom are in the front, and then the wedding parties are kind of at an angle. Or it could be the other, the bride and groom are back here and they're kind of at an angle. And you can imagine how much more interesting that is than if they were just all lined up. They were just like all lined up going straight across, right? That's not nearly as interesting. So we talked a little bit about that diagonal. I can picture train tracks and paths and roads and rivers and, all kinds of things going at that diagonal. And your eye naturally follows those lines, and whatever the focal point is probably at, at that end point of those diagonal lines over there. Or just your eye is leading to what is off the canvas at the, as a focal point. This radial composition, you've probably seen different things like that, and especially with artwork, I think of something that's more of a square composition, because that's kind of, but anything that's kind of like radiating out, like the sun, obviously, but I've seen other things where they're kind of circular. I also think a lot about overhead and like aerial views of things that are kind of more in like this radial composition. This L arrangement here, I don't use this one very often, but I do think about, it's pretty easy to see like a tree, so like this is a tree, and you wouldn't put the tree right in the center, you would offset it a little bit. So that's how I kind of think of like an L arrangement. So, here's the ground and there's a tree. So we'll see if we can't find an example of that one. I talked about the S curve. The pyramid one is kind of like this V arrangement, like I talked about, where they're just calling it a pyramid or a triangle. I've heard it that way too. Hi there, Shannon. And then a circular composition to me is kind of like this radial one, but it's, maybe even a little bit more just contained in that circle, whereas these might have these radiating kind of things coming out, whatever it might be, in the different elements, how you place those, whereas this is all kind of more contained in the circle. So I'm going to have this out, and what I did is I just grabbed some magazines, just some different magazines that I have that, most of them are like travel, like when you go to the rest areas and they have like different travel guides. That's what a lot of these are. So I'm trying to prop this up a little bit higher so you can kind of see and not have it fall over like that. So I started trying to mark a couple of things in the magazine, and what's helpful when you're learning about the different types of composition is just start looking for images and see if they follow any of these 15 different compositions. So when I first looked at this one, I thought of a couple of different compositions that this could be following. And that's not to say that you can't use multiple different ones. I probably won't cut this one out to put in my journal just because it's a little bit larger. I'll probably try to look for some smaller little photos. But when you look at this one, do you see any particular composition that stands out? Out of these 15 different compositions, does that image, does this composition, which is a photograph, but does it follow any of those compositions? I'm going to take a drink of water. Because at first when I looked at this one, I thought, oh, it's, just split right in the middle with the horizon line there. And the house is right in the middle. And that was kind of the first composition that I saw. And I thought, well, that's definitely not the rule of thirds. It's not even exactly this golden section. But when I looked at it, what I started noticing was the lights and the darks. And I started noticing where my eye was drawn to. And that, as an artist, is what we're trying to do, is to direct someone's eye to where we want the focal point to be. So Donna says the triangular one, or the pyramid one is what they called it in here. So that's what I started seeing too. So these lines of the path, the edges of this stream, this river, are kind of directing your eye to this windmill, right? And it looks like there's a little bit, maybe of a little waterfall kind of coming out of there. It's directing your eye right to that focal point. So if it was just the house there and these, I don't know that I would have thought that it was a very strong composition. But because it's directing our eye over here to this, and even these fence lines, I started noticing are at an angle rather than straight. So this kind of leads my eye again over to this. And even the fence that's in the reflection of the water is kind of leading over to there. So this, at first when I looked at it, seemed like kind of a boring composition, right? But then as I started looking at it a little bit more, I realized, oh yeah, that does have a little bit more. So let's look at this one right here. I know it has the words up here and it's more of an ad, but if I looked at this composition, I noticed right off, this person's not in the center. They're not right in the middle of the composition. They're kind of down and to the left. And what my eye is really drawn to is this glove right here, right? It's this movement. I don't know if he's, already swung. I don't know if he's getting ready to, but my eye is kind of like right here where those white gloves are. And if I put a grid over and, it would be more like turn this direction since this is a vertical rectangle here. That intersection right there is right where his gloves are, kind of like in that area right there, and that circle. So instead of placing him like right in the middle or, even off to the side here, he's down and to the left so that the focal point of not just him, but specifically his hands, because even in the ad, it says to grip it, that's where they want our eye to lead. That is where they placed him intentionally. And that's why if you look at a magazine like this, you'll probably find some great examples because these are marketing photos. This, they're made by people who know these compositional rules and they're going to follow them to lead your eye. This one definitely, anytime I see a stream, a river, anything like that, it's definitely following this S. I always call it just an S curve, but a compound curve. So anytime that I see that, I'm always kind of interested, my eye goes kind of back to wherever that's leading, far away, or it could be a focal point, kind of up close there. And they're really just kind of using that as an ad, so there's not necessarily a focal point as much in there. So let's look at this one because I really right off don't see the composition, but when I start to look at it and I notice where my eye goes first, then I start to notice what composition it's using. So at first I see the four people, I start to see the flowers, but when I really notice, all of these people are looking at this person. So all of their eyes are kind of following over here. And I really see like this wheel, right? And I see them waving. So this area right in here, again, you know, kind of like this one where it's like this bottom right intersection is where they're coming in. And if it's the hand there, then I kind of think of, you know, kind of like these diagonal lines. It could be kind of like this golden spiral where they're all kind of leading to that little area in there. All the leading lines from their eyes kind of leading over into there, and that little space of like raising the hand. So when I first looked at it, I didn't really see it, but as I started noticing like where my eye goes. So when you're creating artwork, you can be more intentional. And if you need to make the yellow brighter so that your eye goes there, that's where you can be much more intentional and you can feel more like an artist because you're doing things with intention to lead the viewer's eye to where you want it to go by making brighter colors. By, you know, if all three of these people weren't looking over to here, I don't know that the composition would really work as well. If they were all just, you know, looking forward, I'd almost think that the focal point is like off the paper somewhere, you know. So because they're all very intentionally looking over here, that's where your eye goes. So you can do that more intentionally. Well, so let's look at this windmill one. I really like this image of this windmill. I think this is from Illinois. Yeah. So a windmill in Illinois. So let me see if I can not get that glare there. So when I first look at this, I, you know, feel like it's not exactly in the center, you know, so it is at least down a little bit. It's not just kind of like lined up right along the center. But there's something that really draws my eye to it because of the interesting shape. You know, it's not just a regular lighthouse. But when I look at the actual lines of the windmill, that is when I see that radial composition. So this radial composition, all of your eye line, the leading lines are drawn into the center, and then they kind of go down the lighthouse, and even the fencing and the people and, you know, the flags and everything is kind of leading your eye to look at the lighthouse. So or windmill. So I really, I like the idea of a windmill for that radial composition. So you can look through your catalogs there and, you know, any kind of magazines, fashion magazines. I mean, all of those images are very intentional about having a composition. They want your eye to be led to what they're trying to market. So they're definitely going to follow these guidelines very intentionally. So you can, like I said, look up Beginner's Guide to Composition. Just go to images. You can find this same image. I'm going to keep this in my journal so that I can have reference to it. And I'm going to try to find a couple of smaller photos that I can put inside my journal so then I can keep it as a reference about what different compositions to use and then examples from magazines to show these different compositions. I hope that this was helpful because I really feel like if you can, I'll say, master composition, if you can really start to understand these 15 different compositions, but also know about color and line and shape and value and all those things, your artwork will become so much stronger because you've been intentional and because you are thinking about the viewer that's looking at your artwork. So those are the 15 different ones. I will put this as a replay up on YouTube so that you can watch the entire playlist over there and be able to come back to it and be able to, just reference these 15 different ones. And I will be back next week with the letter D. So I will see you at 10:30 Eastern next Monday.